Man, what a wild week it has been for my long lost missing great uncle drama that's been going on. For those who aren't familiar, in 1982, March of 1982, my uncle, Clarence Roy Banks, Roy, went missing from his home on Ring Lane in Milford, Ohio. When I first started digging into his case about 2.5, 3, maybe even 4 years ago now, I wasn't really sure what to expect. And as the police said, his file was extremely thin. He was figured to be a missing person, and then nothing really ever came of it. The police swore up and down in the 80s that it was just a case of a man gone missing. They couldn't confirm if there was foul play or not. But clearly something must have happened because his vehicle was dumped at the Cincinnati International Airport in Hebron, Kentucky. And after I got my hands on some of the police reports, it mentioned that there was an evidence bag with a burnt jacket. And that's kind of where we are right now. Well, until today when I talked to the detectives on the case in Miami Township. For the first time in 40 years, they opened the evidence bags to see what they had. And I'm going to share some of it here. Now, I'm going to have a very in-depth YouTube video for this because TikTok only lets me talk for like 10 minutes. But here are the core details you need to know about this case so far. First and foremost, Uncle Roy was 49 years old. He was actually turning 50 in 1982. He is one of 11 siblings on my maternal grandma's side of the family. My family never really talked a lot about Uncle Roy. I only knew that he had disappeared. I think I officially heard some of the story when I was about 9 or 10 years old. It's just one of those great mysteries that we never figured out. And part of the reason we never figured it out was because when the family started putting pressure on the police about the situation with him disappearing, they were told to back off, that there was some danger involved, that there was happy substance involved, the dealing of said substances. And we're not talking about my Uncle Roy, mind you. We're talking about a close family member of his. As I've been talking with the police officers on this case, they clarified what the danger was, and it is a very active club that's still active today within Clermont, Hamilton counties in Kentucky. And if any members of that club are watching this case is 40 fucking years old. If you know anything, could you please just tell us where to find him so we can reunite him with his family members? Okay? That's all we're asking. That's all we are asking. So with that said, Roy just randomly disappeared. I think it was on I want to say it was the 18th of March of 1982. He was supposed to go to an appointment at 1 p.m. that day to a lawyer's office to pick up a settlement for a car accident he had been in 7 years prior. His daughter and his wife had spoken to him. His wife, though, I think around noon, about an hour before he was supposed to go to this appointment to the attorney's office way out in the boonies in Loveland, Ohio. The neighbor on Ring Lane in Milford says that they saw Roy driving down the street, turning onto Woodville Pike, and that's the last they ever saw of him. Now, when they say they saw him, I don't know if they mean they physically saw him in the car driving by, or they just saw his vehicle. It's a Mustang go by, and it was a red Mustang. So I don't know if they actually saw him in the vehicle. Mind you, also, his son apparently had stopped by the night before to get some money from his dad. Roy also worked at Newtone down in Cincinnati as a job. He'd been there forever. The man was all about routine. This was very, very certain. Officers, when they investigated the report that his wife made, his wife Ramona, was supposed to be picked up later that night that he disappeared. She was at the airport waiting for him to pick her up. She'd been out of town in Florida visiting friends, family, whatever. And when he didn't show up, of course, she called the police to figure out, what the hell, where's my baby? And police, when they investigated this missing persons report, they noted that his gas cap key was still at the house and his dentures were still there. Now, initially, I thought, who would leave the house without their dentures? But apparently, Roy was known to do this. And I've since learned with my old age gaining on me that dentures are not always comfortable or a good fit. So he tended to not wear them. And it could have just been absence of mind that he didn't take the key. But I don't believe that, and we'll get into that later. So Uncle Roy's gone on March 18th morning. Wife calls the police. Police do an investigation. Dude's missing. We don't know what to tell you. A couple of days later, they find his vehicle dumped at the airport parking lot, which again, this was not uncommon. They didn't have cameras like they do today. They didn't have security like they do today. People were constantly dumping vehicles at the airport. And that's literally all we know. Well, up until recently when I started sticking my nose in this. So I started digging into Ancestry DNA. I started digging into newspapers.com. And then there's another newspaper website online that I got into. And I just started doing my search. I started tracking things down. I would like to point out, though, the whole reason 4.5, 5 years ago, I was drawn back into this story. Like, I'd completely forgotten about it until I saw a picture of my great-great-grandmother in Breathitt, Kentucky. And in this picture, I recognized a couple of my uncles and what looked to be my Mamaw Banks. And my Mamaw is precious to me. So when I saw the brothers and all of this, I'm like, let's do this. So I got into Ancestry and I started doing my genealogy, and then I came across Clarence Roy Banks. And I'm like, Clarence, Uncle Roy, that's the one that disappeared. So that's how I ended up going down this rabbit hole to begin with. And I'm a writer by trade, so I just want to get a full picture of this man. I have full pictures of all of my relatives except for Roy. There's this just giant gaping black hole of no information. And honestly, it's weird too, because the family didn't talk about him very much at all when he disappeared. They were genuinely scared of retribution from said club in Milford, Ohio, Clermont County back then, and they're still active today. And again, guys, if you're watching this club, I'm just trying to find him. I'm not looking to convict or like bring justice. We're just trying to figure out what the hell happened, okay? So my uncle, you know, he lived on Ring Lane, which ironically, I did not know that's where his house was. And when I saw where it was, I lived down the street from this man's house for like 8, 9 years. And apparently his son was living still there for quite a number of years as well. But anyway, apparently an immediate family member in his household, I'm not going to speculate who. I mean, I know who, but I'm not going to throw it out there. But yeah, apparently he was adjacent to this club that is notorious for dealing happy substances, committing violent acts, the whole 9 yards, including making people disappear. So obviously he's high on their radar of trying to figure out. But, you know, I was in newspaper.com and I've been exploring things. I ran across an unusual article where my uncle was like suing a former friend of his for $1,200, like felony theft level stuff, because this friend tried to sell him part of a pub that he wasn't entitled to sell. And this friend also later had a judgment against him for basically misrepresenting himself as an insurance agent with a company he used to work for. And this all was taking place within 18 months of my uncle's disappearance. But it gets even weirder, because I talked to the officer again this past week, and guess what else? Found out his attorney, Carl Meeker, out of Loveland, had made a statement to an officer at one point during the investigation that someone had called his office the night before Roy was supposed to come pick up that settlement check, and said to make the settlement check out to his wife Mona instead. But it wasn't Roy who called to say to do that. And it wasn't Mona. And it was the night before he disappeared. Yeah. So you know what I did? I did a deep dive on Mr. Carl Meeker, this attorney out of Loveland, right? And this is why you have to work with law enforcement, because the officer I was working with was like, look, I keep saying he's out of Lebanon, not Loveland. But all the newspapers said Mr. Meeker was out of Loveland. And it turns out I figured out why the officer thought it was Loveland, and they had his name misspelled. The guy lived on Lebanon Road in Loveland. So we've kind of tracked down the attorney, because I want some more information on who called, if the attorney can remember. And it looks like the attorney is still living and breathing. I'm hoping we hear back from him. I actually got numbers from the police officer who, you know, did some tracing and said, why did you call first? So I did. But on top of that, though, guys, like the evidence, that bag that was shown, it looks like maybe we can send it for genetic tests. If the geneticists think it's possible that there's DNA, then that means certain immediate family members could have some court-ordered swabs required. Because from what I'm understanding, that Mustang was not a family car. But yeah, it's been interesting. And the fact that the police were saying that this wasn't foul play, like forever, even though they found a burnt jacket in the car. Body disposal, hello. And current police, of course, agree this is totally foul play. Oh, it's 100% foul play. But when we look at all of these different elements that were in Roy's life, it really makes you wonder who he was, what he was a part of, who was around him. Because it wasn't just a certain family member bringing a bad element. I mean, look at the whole Parker's Pub. Even the attorney had been scolded by the Ohio Supreme Court at one point. He was handling multiple cases. the plot thickens. Holy shit.